Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, whatever the case happens to be for you, and whatever the part of the world you're joining us today. My name is Christian Harity. I'm managing partner at GEODESIC. I'll have the pleasure of being your host for today's webinar. I'm really excited. This is sort of a first to bring three experts from three different camps. I've had the pleasure of having quite long chats, really in-depth, about digital modern working and the way we work today with all of them. And it's exciting to have them in a room. It's too bad that we only have such a short period of time to talk with them. Maybe we can repeat this sometime in the future. Each one is an expert in their field. They can talk hours on any of these topics and do so spontaneously. And it's something that I definitely suggest doing if you have the opportunity at any time. But today it really is our leading perspectives on enterprise digital working, trying to get a little bit of an idea of what's going on, get an idea of what the pulse is at the moment and what we're facing. I'd like to introduce to you our panelists, going in alphabetical order. David Fletcher, Director Enterprise Sales at BZ. Little fun fact about him, which I thought this was really fascinating. Took a break from SharePoint intranets, which I can understand, but those projects can be. And it took 3 years to travel the world on a motorcycle. That's awesome. Then we have David Maffey, President of Acumina. This was really neat when I found this out. For every hour he works, he puts in for his profit, profit business like for Acumina, he puts in a corresponding hour of work with a nonprofit organization he runs that focuses on youth athletic development and social service. Very cool. And Matthew Silberman, Chief Product Officer, PAL Software. He used to be a DJ in Paris 20 years ago, and he often feels like digital workplace ecosystem is still a bit like, the playlist, where he needs to select the best record depending on what the audience and mood is. Welcome, everybody. Let's do a small warm-up round just to get our discussion started. Going in the same order as I just introduced, we'll stick to alphabetical. Just really quick, three current trends, popular trends as you see them right now.
Is that me first then, yeah?
David, Fletcher, that's you.
Excellent. Okay, so a difficult one. You gave us, just to give you the list, and no explanations. So it's very difficult to quantify, and as you know, I can't talk forever. So one of them, of course, is the evolving workplace. Right? What that means, I'll delve into later, of course. One of them is the definition or the understanding of organizations between synchronous and asynchronous collaboration. I think this is something that has been drastically moved forward in the last 18 months due to COVID. And the third one that I wanted to talk about, which is something a little bit more kind of front of mind based on what we're seeing every day with Microsoft and Viva, is the idea of personal productivity and well-being, something that I think we're all very familiar with by watching all the latest conferences from Microsoft. So they're my three things.
David Maffey?
Yeah, so I would take all three of those from David Fletcher also, but in terms of when you think about three of the trends that I think we see at the forefront right now, sort of this concept of the integrated workplace is huge, and I'm sure we'll talk about that during the hour today. The concept of employee wellness and how that transitions to productivity, I think is another incredibly hot topic. And I think while it's I guess I'll call it a Me Too capability or feature, we're seeing a little bit of a resurgence around what does it mean to actually deliver productivity on mobile to all workers, right, from C-suite to deskless. So I think that's another trend that's sort of resurfaced here with some opportunities across the modern workplace.
Matthew?
Yes, and on my side, two stuff. The two first one will be coming from HR and communication. Since the month of June, we received a lot of inquiries about help us making our employees back to work. In France, Western Europe, a lot of hybrid work stuff. Open discussion that go way beyond the traditional how do I keep my employee informed. So a lot of about that with practical example, such as we need to book office and desk now when our employees get to work, how you help us on that. So maybe I will go a little bit deeper on that. The other one, once again, it's from the HR, is please help me keeping the social interaction for a mid-term and long-term basis. because once again, we are getting back to work, but in a hybrid work situation. How do we keep people engaged? How do we keep everybody, including the frontline worker? It used to be one, let's say, example of a question we had from the comms manager, but now it's very, let's say, exciting to see coming with a HR question. The third one is more on the Microsoft Teams. You talked about Viva just before. We used to have a lot of interaction discussing about Teams as an IT tool or as another service from Office 365. Now, once again, we have HR comes a little bit of business line getting back to us to say, I want to use Teams not just for chat and video. Can you help us on that? And we will go into the detail about that, but we have interesting business discussion with them.
Okay. On that note, maybe we'll kind of go backwards on that, because that's out of the current trends. Is also, what are the hidden trends, emerging trends? We'll go backwards from Matthew and to the front. Just one major one that stands out in your mind, in short, that is coming out right now, or something that you foresee in the short term.
Yeah. So if I start with the let's say obvious trend behind the scene, we can see, so as part of how do I keep people engaged, there's stuff around, it does not necessarily need to be linked to a business process, so, or at least how you inject that as part of the digital workplace process and our day-to-day process. And there's a big word that we, let's say, we used to use as a vendor, but we heard now from the HR and from the com, which is gamification. How do I use gamification in some processes?
Okay.
So let's say that will be one as a start.
Alrighty.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we're seeing more, we often ask a prospective customer when we meet with them who they're building the experience for. Are they building the experience for their business, or are they building it for their employees? And we don't let them answer both. And I think one of the trends that we're seeing big time across our customer base is this mega shift to building experiences for every individual employee and less about the business. And I think that can be scary to corporate communicators and HR professionals and line of business owners at first. But when you understand the productivity gains of making every employee feel like the experience was built for them, it tends to lap some of those concerns. And so I think that trend of being so focused on micro moments for that particular employee around action, intelligence, and information is critical right now.
David,
My one is, I'd say it's hidden in the context that it's not visible to everybody. It's not something you are all cognitive of. And mine is the idea of the emergence of single page applications within the digital workplace. So for me, I've talked about this for about 2 or 3 years now, but one of the main reasons we always struggle with is engagement, about keeping people within your tool, within your system, particularly now more than ever. You're competing against lots of other products, as Mathieu mentioned, the likes of Teams, and obviously Viva's emerged, and all these wonderful products that are around and being used, as well as shadow IT. And one of the things I think is very, very important in digital workplaces today, and of course, one of the things we've been working on, is the idea of single page applications. So no matter what your users are doing, they kind of stay in one place. And this is not new, right? This has been happening in Twitter and Facebook and these products for a long, long time. But for an awful long time, we haven't done it in the intranet. We've had several different tools, and we've clicked on them and it's opened a new window, or it's opened a new page. And in there's many further kind of benefits. There's the idea of tricking our brain into loading time. There's the idea of, everything's emerging in modals, keeping people in, and particularly on a desktop experience, the idea of having everything in a single page, I think is an emerging trend that we're less cognizant of, but is definitely something I think we're seeing more and more in the digital workplace. Even if they don't know they're requesting it, I think customers are. They're saying, how do we keep people on this homepage? Real estate of screens is becoming more valuable, and traditional widgets that we maybe used to love in the 90s and 2000s are kind of less important. It's now about making sure we use every piece of that real estate of the home screen.
Oh, definitely, and part of the growing understanding of what actually is employee experience, instead of just talking about it, moving there.
Yep.
One quick major pain, one major challenge that organizations are facing right now. what stands out in your mind? What is one of the biggest pains that you see? Let's go back in the same alphabetical order. So we'll start with David Fletcher.
One. It's different for different organizations, of course, depending on size and all the rest of it. But I think one of the things, and I'll talk about it because it's something we dealt with in the product, but localization. So what I mean by that is you've got very large enterprise customers, some of our customers, 200, 300,000 employees, and they're dealt with the pandemic, which of course we all know about and we've all talked to death about, but you become a number in a very large organization when you're working from home. You can't replicate that water cooler, you can't replicate that culture. And I think one of the struggles of intranets that we've seen in the last, let's say, 24 months are to replicate localization, not just from a language perspective, but also from an identity, from a cultural perspective. So I think the biggest challenge of the customers we see in the kind of sales and early phase is, hey, how do we keep that culture, that localization, that feeling of belonging for those small pockets of users, as opposed to just giving information and technology and data to the masses. And I think that's a problem we see with a lot of our enterprise customers.
David Maffei?
Yeah, I think one of the issues that we've seen emerge is, and I think this goes for all three of us on this call through the lens of how we license our products and go to market. But every Acumatica customer is a Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft 365 shop. And what we're seeing is that as Microsoft is looking to further monetize every user inside of these large enterprises, to David's point, selling to companies, large diversified manufacturers, financial services companies, life sciences corporations that have hundreds of thousands of employees, that there's an inflection and a break point for some of these companies in not wanting to necessarily frontline worker license every single employee in their business. And so what is a true enterprise employee experience if you can't get information, action, and intelligence to every single employee? How do I get information in the pocket of the shop floor worker who's working in a suburb of Brazil for a large Japanese manufacturing company when they have stated that they will not buy that person a license? So this is something that's a hurdle that we're solving right now, and that I know others are as well, probably my colleagues on the phone today. But it's a huge issue, and the bigger and more diversified the customer base and the more Microsoft drives towards licensing every one of those users, there's an opportunity to be solved there.
Yeah, totally agree with you, David. This is true that there's a lot of diversity, office worker being all with Microsoft 365 and frontline worker from one company being a few portion of them or none of them being equipped with the Microsoft license. So now IT and the enterprise are asking us to deal with that. Agree with that, David. Also agreed with the other David about the localization, for sure. Not pushing the same métier in the same language for everyone is a concern for years. I had prepared one that I would like to propose you is digital native versus less digital people, and it tends to match with clarity on the tool and the channel for information dissemination. Let's say the people that will be less comfortable with the digital tool and the variety of tool, let's say HR and comms really have difficulty to engage them. Is it Teams? Is it email? Is it the intranet? Which page of the intranet? Is it Yammer? Another discussion. So yes, years ago we tried to put a dashboard with every discussion in it. Maybe there's other way to do it. But for sure, the fact to demultiply the number of apps within a mobile or within your PC desktop, it's something that HR and comms start seeing as a big concern now.
On that, and this is an open question to everyone. Have you seen much of a change? I mean, the digital native versus the digital immigrant is kind of an interesting point that we were facing before, and now after this crisis, which I'm going to try to stay a little bit away from the crisis since that's what everyone's talking about and how the pandemic and home working really affected us. But has that changed? Has the maturity factor changed where a larger portion of native or not were forced into a new digital working?
So let's say if we take the Microsoft Teams example, before the COVID situation, there was this kind of running joke where it takes between 10 and 20 minutes for the average French to connect to a Teams. After the COVID, obviously, let's say maybe that dropped down to 3 to 5 minutes to really start the meeting. So obviously the capability of everyone to connect and to activate the camera and the speaker, it's fine now with video, but still, how do I manage a chat between a Teams channel? How do I not just ping a colleague, but really transform a business process? This is the kind of stuff that we introduced at least 1 year ago as part of the extended capability of Power Teams. And hardly no one was taking care of that 1 year ago. And now we have a lot of incoming calls asking, and not only from the IT, but really from the business, sales or HR, asking us to help them for a specific business process, onboarding employees and so on. So I would find it as a maturity improvement, no value judgment, and no judgment value of that as the global community, but still a gap exists.
I think it's definitely everyone had to roll out Teams, everyone had to roll out Slack, everyone had to roll out all these different products, and I think it's caused two things. It's like when someone becomes famous and all of a sudden Twitter has an opinion on it, like everyone on Twitter, whether their opinion is valid or warranted or quantified, they all have an opinion. And I think what we're finding now is that everybody has an opinion. Like everybody thinks Teams is this or that, and this is, you know, also kind of amplified by the fact that Microsoft tells you that Teams is everything, right? So you ask them what they had for lunch and their answer is Teams or Viva. You know, this is kind of the world that we're living in right now. And I think I, on average, speak to, I don't know, 5-6 customers a day, and most of them have no idea what Teams is or what it should be. And then at the same time, none of them have a clue, to David's point, what their licensing is, or whether they should be licensing these users, or whether they have to, or what their EA even says around licensing. And if they don't license them, are they going to get a penalty? So I think maturity is an interesting question. I think everyone now wants to and needs to and recognizes the need for technologies in this space, but having the knowledge or the kind of understanding of these technologies is less, I think, because more of us need them. So I'm not saying I'm an expert, I'm not saying we're experts. We live in this world where we have to talk about this every day, and we know the kind of things that Microsoft puts in the EAs for the licensing agreement, and we know what Teams is and why it was created as a synchronous tool. And these kind of things that we talk about day in, day out, we have to educate. But now you're educating everybody, right? Because HR, as you say, have a seat at the table, and they're asking the same questions as IT, and they're asking the same questions as internal comms. So I think it's a difficult one to answer around maturity. Everybody has these products, everybody wants these products, everybody's using these products correctly or incorrectly. That's a different topic, I think.
I really like that, the fact that there's a growing feeling of maturity. So the individual assuming that they're more mature or that they're more experienced is definitely something that's come up, because now they've been force exposed to technology. They've used it in their eyes more or less successfully, and so they actually think that they know what's going on, and they still have quite a gap there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed across the board. No, just acknowledging.
We're moving into our Q&A session. I also invite any of the attendees that have questions or follow-up questions or want to pick out a point that was really interesting, please add them into chat. We'll keep an eye on those and try to feed those in. I'm going to segue right off this topic, which actually really fits well. One of the most shocking things that we experienced when doing a survey was the importance of mobile and apps was incredibly high pre-pandemic, and even in the beginning of the pandemic, it was really talked about a great deal. And one of the most shocking things that we discovered now in this year is that many are saying, you know, leave me alone with apps. I don't need apps. I'm not on the go. I'm in my home office. I need to concentrate. I need the tools that I'm using to work, and they need to make sense. And I want that to work. So stop talking to me about mobile and start talking to me about the tools that I'm using. Have you experienced this, or have you experienced something similar in terms of the trends now as people are moving in and becoming more mature or developing sort of a working culture out of the new exposed technology?
So I'll take first stab at this. So I think the answer is it depends, right? So one of the things I said at the outset was that there's this sort of morphing around what mobility means. And I think that sometimes when we're selling to lines of business in these organizations, they're telling a great story about the fact that they have a complete blanketed view of every type of worker in their organization. They understand all the problems across the organization. They've synthesized that down, and now they're able to solve those problems. But when you really peel that onion back, what you start to see is they're solving the problems in many cases, not always, but in many cases for the loudest key stakeholders, the squeakiest wheel. And the problem is that while many of us, all of us that are on this phone, are still doing a lot of work from home, and a lot of the line of business owners, the CMOs, the head of corporate comms, CHROs that I'm selling to are still at home, there is a tremendous amount of frontline workers and deskless workers that are back to work or never stopped, right? And so I think it's easy. I had a conversation with a customer and with an analyst 2 weeks ago, right? And they said, well, you know, we really don't need a mobile app anymore. And I said, well, that's fine, but you have 75,000 users, and you just told me 30,000 of them you don't issue a laptop to. So what is your plan to be able to make them part of the workplace? And they were silent on the phone. Right? They were like, well, we're really solving for our key employees. And as soon as it came out of her mouth, she was like, oh my God, I just said that like a third of our workforce isn't key to our business. Right. So I think it really depends. So I'm seeing actually a trajectory jump in those larger diversified organizations that have immense amounts of frontline workers that really never stopped being frontline workers through this pandemic, and doubling down on mobile and figuring out how to do it in a way where you can leverage the canvases available to them on the mobile device. But it is critically important that the heartbeat of so many of these organizations sits within those frontline workers. And I think it's easy to forget about them if you're not thinking holistically about modern workplace across your whole business.
And I think we also, we all three of us are Microsoft products. We work within the Microsoft ecosystem. And of course, Microsoft Store is mobile first, right? So when a customer comes to, you know, any one of us, it's kind of expected. It's like a given. It's like, hey, you guys, you know, you have a native app. But I think the point that we made before about licensing, and of course, what David just mentioned there about frontline, you know this, you know, as well as anyone, Christian, but we've got a mining customer with 160,000 users, and 100,000 of them are underground. So they took the start of the pandemic to say, hey, look, we're going to stick an infrastructure to allow these users. Now, the problem has always been historically, it's a secondary thought. A, because they're not licensed, and B, because, well, they don't use they use BYOD, and we've got Intune, or we use these products to manage them, and it's difficult, and there's firewalls, and it's kind of always been a, let's worry about it later kind of thing. And I think what we found is that, again, depending on the line of business that you're in, it's now no longer a later problem. Yes, the desktop guys, the guys working from home, we need to get fixed, and that's urgent right now because we're not in the office and we need to open our firewalls and allow everyone to access our entire ecosystem. But those frontline workers, just like David said, are still frontline workers. And I think we've noticed that maybe the first 12 months of the pandemic, it was all just, let's get busy in and live. And now in the second 12 months, it's like, right, everybody has to have that app. Everyone has to be iOS or Android. And these guys that don't have a license even, we need to get them access on devices. So it's slightly juxtaposed to the findings, but I think maybe if you did it again now, it might be slightly different.
Yeah, I mean, look, Apple has their big announcement event for the new lineup of iOS devices today. One of the big announcements they're going to make is that FaceTime is now going to be a ubiquitous tool that isn't restricted to those that are using Apple devices. And I think that's indicative of what we're seeing across these organizations, where I think that video and connectivity across mobile is more important today than it's ever been. So the survey data is interesting, and I think it really comes back to who are you talking to and what is the problem that they're trying to solve. But across our customers, it's more important than ever.
One last thing before, sorry, Matthew. Video and messaging and Wi-Fi are now no longer nice to have, right? They like food and water. Like, we all expect it. It's just you know, it's a human right. And I think that's something that is now no longer in RFPs. I always joke, Microsoft never does an RFP, right? They never get them. We all get them, but it's now no longer in there. The ability to link on a mobile. It's kind of what you should, of course, right?
Well, I think the phenomenon of what I can, if I can have it at home and I can have it in my private life, I expect to be able to do these things in my work life as well, and you can really see that. But going back to particularly with the emergence now of HR is becoming more and more a driver. They're really joining the game, but also leadership. So C-suite and leadership have really been sensitized to, oh, wait a minute, we can't procrastinate on this issue anymore. We obviously have something to deal with here, and they're now discovering how important and how powerful some of these tools can be for them managing, but also taking this employee-centric approach, which is how am I going to help the employee? How am I going to enrich? David Matthew before was what brought up the whole well-being aspect, and tying that a little bit back together. It sounds an awful lot like a bit of the classic 80s business organizational strategy, but with those drivers jumping in, what are you seeing as the some of the trends that they're going for, what they're looking for specifically, and what needs do they chiefly are they trying to meet?
Yeah, first of all, to confirm that HR are emerging, let's measure it by the request for proposal we had to answer to, and the kind of this bid session we have to meet with. Half of them used to be IT plus com, and some of them it was IT plus com plus HR as another stakeholders. Mm-hmm. Since I would say 6 months to 1 year, we have started received our first HR-led RFP with employee engagement drivers being the first. So can you help me making this informal moment? You name the water cooler. We have a kind of a coffee machine, a virtual coffee machine as part of our suite, and the water fountain as well. But having just very practical topics such as I need to book office desk and seats and parking lot when I get back to the office. I need to bring ideation, this kind of stuff. It used to be driven by the comms up to now, and even this week I was let's say lucky to be in an event in Paris, my first physical event, and for the first time I get a card from an employee engagement manager for a French company, so belonging to the HR. It was the first time it happened to me. Maybe it was not the case in the other region, but this is some kind of a trend that something is happening.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many different ways that these things come together, and we talk a lot about. I mean, if you guys have ever been on our website or heard me talk before, I talk about sort of this demarcation line that sits between a modern intranet and a digital hub. And I think that when you look at the lines of business that we're selling to, and that are leading the sort of search for technology like ours, and I mean the collective ours, there are still lots of line of business tools that you can solve, right? If you said, I really just want a mobile communications method to interact with my employees, well, I still think that you're probably looking, when you're doing your research, you're getting a social chorus / dynamic signal, you're getting a staff base, you're understanding those line of business applications. If you jump over to the HR world and you say, well, I want to think more about wellness, I want to think more about inclusion, I want to think about better microprocesses like onboarding and offboarding and relocation, et cetera. Well, you still have Workday and other, UKG and others that are raising their hand saying, no, you don't need any other tool. Like, we do it all. And then Microsoft's sitting there and they're saying, well, no, we do it all too. So like, you guys own all of us. And I think that that's where that sort of integrated workplace exists that I talked about earlier. I think our most successful customers are those where sitting at the table is the CIO, the head of corporate comms, or the head of marketing, and the head of HR, and they've collectively come together with a decision that they need to sort of harmoniously operate together to deliver a better experience to every employee across the business. And then when you sort of get to that common denominator level, you're able to come down from that and say, okay, so what does that mean for communication? What does it mean for microprocesses and operations? What does it mean for delivering content in a personalized method? What does it mean for mobility, et cetera? And then what are the tools that get us there? I'll often, we'll talk for 3 or 4 different sessions with a prospective customer before we even show them technology, right? It's like, for us, we just want to understand, what problem are you trying to solve? And it's not weird in my world for us to say, you might be better off calling someone else, because like what you just described to me, there are best of breed tools out there that do that. And so I really think you have to dig in and understand what these organizations are trying to do, because those 3 key stakeholder groups are coming together. And if they come together, we are, the collective we, again, are a very good solution. But if you're trying to solve these things in a one-off fashion, I still think there's so many line of business applications that causes lots of chaos and confusion in this market.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's the analytics conversation. Like, we want the world's greatest analytics. Well, go and buy Google Analytics or Cardiolog or Matomo or Adobe Analytics or tools that are analytical tools. And of course, all three of us will have integrations and we'll hook into it and we'll be able to pull our data into them. But this is particularly productivity and well-being. We're going to get it wrong, hugely wrong. I don't mean us as in just those three on the call. I mean, the industry is getting it wrong, and it already is, right? So Microsoft did a release report, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, it came out, and it's cool. I've got it in front of me, actually. I was reading it again this morning. It's the new Future of Work report. And in there's loads of really interesting stats. And they talk about productivity, they talk about well-being. And of course, they echo some of the thoughts that they've done with Viva, right? So they'll say, okay, look, Viva's great, it's about well-being. We're working with Headspace. We're going to tell you to recharge and take mental breaks. But we're going to do it all in teams, right? So connections and everything's going to be in teams. And then in the next page, there's this statistic about how all of us are now working between 6 and midnight because we're living in teams. And we're getting constantly interrupted on our phones because they're invasive. We're getting push notifications, and I'm getting them right now as I'm talking. And you never turn off. So if you're looking at well-being and mental wellness from an HR perspective, and then you're telling everyone work on a device with notifications 24 hours a day in an app that never sleeps, that's not asynchronous, that's a completely juxtaposed position. You're arguing with yourself inside of one technological stack. And it's not Microsoft's fault, it's not our fault, it's the industry trying to shift. We all did it when bots came out. We all tried to make bots the answer to everything, and of course they weren't. We use AI, we use Luis, we use cognitive services, and we're slowly finding ways to make it work inside the enterprise. And I think this is the latest trend. It's incredibly important, it's incredibly valuable, and you've got companies that have been doing it, just doing it very well for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years in some instances, and integrating with them makes sense. But trying to shoehorn it all into one product, the idea of one tool to rule them all, as much as we'd all like that, and we can aspire to that kind of approach, it doesn't work. Specialists are specialists for reasons, and I think that the sooner we all understand that and appreciate it, and I think then the better our entire digital workplaces or employee experiences will be, because we're leveraging the best-in-class solutions.
I think you've brought up two really critical points. One of them being if you ask employees today, most of them, they don't actually care what the tool is that they're using. They just want it to work. And so one of the natural things to do when everyone was pitching all their solutions is to try to sell solutions so everybody knows the name of it and says, well, I just do everything in Teams, or I just do everything in, because it's almost as if they're selling medication to the patients, saying, ask your doctor about Teams. At the same time, in order to compete, they started to consolidate. So they were trying to come up with a unified experience, but the point was missed because it wasn't about the brand that you were using. It was just a solution that works. It's a convention that works and that people can use, particularly in a global organization where then suddenly the boundary and time zones no longer matter because, oh, well, such and such is available and the dot is green. So I'm going to message them even though they might be in the middle of their daughter's piano recital. And that we're experiencing that to a greater degree.
Are we going to red and white, which of course used to mean do not disturb and now means focusing, and everyone's going to message you anyway because you're focusing, you're not really working, right? So yeah.
How are we approaching the problem? Is anyone doing a good job at approaching that problem, and are people thinking or talking about it enough?
I think there's two elements here, and look, we are quite literally coming out with something that we're calling a wellness engine. It's already in use by probably a dozen customers. It's formally going GA in our next release. And I think it's a good feature set for the right customer in the right circumstance. I do not think that it is the be all end all. Every customer I'm going to show this to is going to say, oh my God, this will change my world. And I think because it is still very niche, it is. It's you're trying to use technology and information and action to penetrate the mental human connection between worker and worker, worker and manager, worker and business. And I think that you can only automate and sort of wizardize so much of it. And so for the right use case, for the right customer, yes, there's a definite application. But I do think that this sort of belief that, you know, let's just keep putting more and more and more. I mean, that's how and we all integrate with SharePoint, right? We all do. So SharePoint's a mess because Microsoft has just dumped everything into it for 20 years. And now I'm on the phone weekly with customers who are like, I feel like Teams is the new SharePoint. And it's like everyone's just dumping everything into it. And it's become this like micro app graveyard that people don't know how to navigate. And then we're going to add one more thing in that's going to help you navigate because it's going to make you better connect emotionally with the people that work for you. I just think it's a stretch. And I think there are certain applications of it that will work in the right circumstances. But I still think we're far away from being able to figure out how to use tools like ours or Teams or anything else to better get into the sort of the human connection that exists between worker and manager.
Matthew, you first on me.
No, good.
So my first point in this is, look, we all love Microsoft, hate them, we love them, right? They're the reason we all exist, but of course they do things sometimes that frustrate all of us, but also make us very happy. And I think one of the things that I really like about Viva for me is it's giving us a name. So one of the things I struggle personally with at Beezy, I've been with Beezy for 5 years. And when I joined, we did all these marketing exercises and we sat down in a room and said, well, what are we? Are we ESN? Are we an intranet? All these kind of labeling kind of things. And I think for the first time in a long time, we've got a home, right? So I think the idea of the employee experience is really important because we go back to 2011, we were a newsfeed, right? And then you move forward and we were basically an aggregation of all the content from SharePoint. And we're talking Citrion era, we're talking a long time ago. And there was kind of us doing that in SharePoint on-prem. And I think today, when you talk about doing this right, I don't think it's kind of a solution, right? I don't think connections, because connections, let's be honest, connections is an iframe for your intranet, right? It's a home for all of your intranet content to be pushed into Teams. And I think it's a great idea in theory. I think there's still a lot of work to get it right, but I think finally now this idea of employee experience, with all the wonderful things that Microsoft is doing underneath powering it, with all the AI, with all the cognitive services, with SharePoint Syntax, with Q&A Maker, with the topics. I mean, topics and SharePoint Syntax, super cool. But now they're starting to look at this, and then they've plugged in well-being, and of course they bought LinkedIn Learning. All of a sudden, you're not just saying, well, we've got one tool to rule them all, or we're giving you this one solution. They're saying, well, actually, you're using SharePoint Learning, or you're using Fuse, or you're using Workday, or you're using SuccessFactors. And through the emergence of Flow and Power Automate and the Power Platform, and through the emergence of the idea of connections, the idea of an employee experience, I think now we're getting to a place where what customers really want and what they've wanted for about 3 or 4 years is a reality, because all of a sudden you can have this single place that for want of a better expression, is an aggregator, but it's more than that. It's an employee experience with completely personal, relevant content to those users. And why do we all want it? Well, like you said at the start, Christian, if we've got it in our personal life, we want it in the work life. So we've all had Facebook's content that's relevant to you, Twitter's content that's relevant to you. We're used to this. You log into Google, you log into Wall Street Journal, it's your preferences, it's your news. And I think the idea of the employee experience, the name that Microsoft have given this, and the wonderful marketing videos they're doing, and giving everyone a kind of understanding of what this finally means. Actually, it means everything. It means all of the things I need to get my work done in one place. Now, whether that is one tool or several tools, of course, will evolve over time. But I think finally it's got a name. And for me, that I'm really happy that, if anything, we're validated in the thoughts that the three of us have been kind of talking about for a long time, of trying to move towards this holistic employee experience approach.
Yeah, and I really love the analogy with the home. So of course Microsoft gave us the home, doing so much marketing about the enterprise and employee experience. So that's fine. I also use this analogy with the customer I talk to say that maybe Viva might be the front door, the front office of this home, but when you open the door, it comes empty, if I say, and we need some additional solution to build the furniture, to build the floor, as you said, David, and the AI from Microsoft and so on will help us to manage with the search ability for sure, and because they are probably the ones that are in better position to do that. But of course, as you said, and as David said, they need the day-to-day apps, and they need the specific use case to fill that home. Otherwise, unfortunately, there might be some frustration from the enterprise, disappointed by what Viva can deliver at the end of the day.
On the topic of bringing up Viva, we were talking about sort of consolidated solutions, and I'm going to call them sort of the magic bullet, which is Viva right now is marketed very strongly in a very magic bullet, silver bullet sort of way. Is that beneficial, or is that more confusing? I mean, I kind of liked David Fletcher's comment on the fact that it is educating the market in terms of what is employee experience, and the fact that it's no longer about putting together an intranet or a homepage for the corporation that makes the that mimics the corporation, but it's personal experience of every employee, and that things are being tailored to me, that things are being delivered to me. But is Viva really a healthy sort of magic bullet? Is it the beginning? Is it confusing people? How do you feel about how we still have that trend of we're going to give it a name and we're going to add? So now we're going to add aggregation, which some of us will ask, well, where was this in the beginning on SharePoint? But we now have another magic bullet solution, or is Viva that? Is it fair to say that? And where are we going with that culturally in terms of our understanding of what this new employee experience approach is?
I think we're all going to race to answer that one. No,
okay, yeah. No, I was about to say, I really feel like what you said, David, just before, the fact that as professional and expert of that matter for a year, we are very exciting to have the opportunity to have employee experience pushed on in front of the table, because Microsoft capability to push messaging on the market is probably 10 times of what we can do even all together. So on that end, it's very exciting, and it's a kind of a good bullet. On the other end, no offense for my ex-Microsoft colleagues, but there is a lot of frustration and confusion to expect in the next weeks and months. The customer I talk to simply do not understand what is Viva, and they are, let's say, they just remind about this kind of new mobile experience, new front door that they could have, but once you say that maybe the best of it might come from syntax topics and this kind of stuff that are very powerful but might cost a lot of additional money, then the confusion starts. And even, I believe it does some in Germany, France, and in a lot of Western Europe countries. As far as insight is concerned, it's a lot of very insightful data about the employee, about how they feel and so on. But, a lot of discussion about personal data, how you keep it, who you get access to it. That is one of the reasons why in Western Europe it used to be named Microsoft My Analytics stuff was never implemented in most of enterprise, because people just want to have it stop, and maybe unfortunately it will be the case with Insight.
So I agree with all of that. I think that Microsoft continuously has a little bit of an identity problem in terms of what they create for themselves in the market, and it's almost like a self-imposed problem. I would tell you that that people that have been operating inside of the Microsoft technology ecosystem for a decade or two, they're like, here's the latest thing that's the shiny new toy that and in 2 years it won't be Viva anymore, it'll be something else. And for those who haven't operated in the market, and this is where you get into that sort of IT CIO versus line of business, they're like, an HR professional who's really never operated in the Microsoft world, because it's been a more technical world, is like, oh my God, Liz, this is the magic bullet we've been waiting for. And so I think you have to navigate that internally at these organizations. The other thing, when I talk about the little bit of the identity crisis, this is not a popular opinion probably with Microsoft, but I actually think that Viva Topics is the most powerful aspect of Viva.
Massively.
And I think that if you are a Viva Topics customer, you are not a Connections customer. And if you're a Connections customer, if you fell in love with Connections, this is the answer. I don't think you can afford Topics. And I think that there is this really, really big, bold line between the two, but they're being marketed as they go hand in hand together, and I just don't see it. Yeah. But we see Topics and Insights as the two biggest areas of opportunity for a vendor like us. Yeah. To take advantage of everything that Microsoft is doing in the market and the amazing technology they're driving, to continue to add value to that. you know, when I look at connections, I think it's more rudimentary, it's more pedestrian, and it's like an answer to a problem that people weren't necessarily raising their hand that they had. And I think there's that big deviation between those two types of customers.
Yeah, I agree. I've done 3 webinars about Viva now, one of them with Microsoft, and every time there's a poll about what are they most excited about, and the people in the panel, it's always topics, and the people watching is always connections. It's always the same story. But my answer to this question is quite a simple one, really. I'm like David said, you know, I've worked with SharePoint since 2008. You know, I've seen GigJam, I've seen Infopedia, I've seen all these wonderful products that came and went, but I've seen the ones that were really successful, and I've seen the ones that, you know, changed our lives. And you see all the investment they've made in search in the last 10 years, and how Q&A makers really changed the game, and how, you know, all the cognitive services stuff, and even the Cortana analytics stuff, which as Matthew rightly mentioned, scared everyone to death when it first came out, until it said the big "only for your eyes" warning, because everyone was like, what? Who sees what I'm doing every day? But I think all of these things are great. But all of them I see as one word. They're a platform. 365 is a platform. It's not a product. It's not a solution. It's a platform. It's a set of tools, a suite of tools that are fantastic and phenomenal and very powerful. But no customer in the world uses them all. No customer uses Kaizala and Teams. No customer uses Sway and, you know, all the different wonderful products that they are. They're a suite of products. They're a platform for either customers to play with, to decide whether they use, or for a vendor or a partner, which is what Microsoft, of course, claims the partner ecosystem is there for, to build meaningful solutions and products. And there are some fantastic ones out there. So I think Viva has done, as I said before, it's done 2 things very well. It's given us a home. It's validated a lot of what we were saying for a long time. You are completely right, though. It has confused the market, but just like David said, it's only confusing people who are new to the market. If you've been in this space for a while, you are skeptical, should we say? Not skeptical, that's the wrong word, but you treat everything with
desensitized.
Desensitized, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, you're desensitized.
The floating screens on the marketing video that I stayed up till 3 a.m. to watch, I know those floating screens aren't real, right? But if you watch them for the first time, you might think, oh, the floating screens are around the corner, right? So I think, yeah, it's great. It's a platform. It's incredibly exciting for us as vendors, because just like David said, just like Matthew said, you know, we're all now playing with connections. We've got the dashboard in preview. We're playing with insights. We're playing with topics. We're looking at SharePoint syntax. We're starting to get excited by all the possibilities this brings us and how this enhances our product. But from a marketing perspective, yeah, a lot of customers are very unclear of what it is.
Now, we all have a very unique perspective in the sense that we've focused on enterprise, which is a very different scale of problems. And the thing that we've been doing for years and years is we're trying to find simplification. So because these enterprise ecosystems were diverse, enormous, unmanageable, and in the beginning, while we were catering to more towards an IT and manageability, then we were trying to find simplicity, and now we're at an employee experience. Are we really still meeting our goals with all these solutions confusing things? They're having a direct impact on the culture, which may or may not be sensible, since the tool I'm using isn't as important as how well it works for me as an employee. Are we achieving our goals, or are we moving away or more further away from them when we think of that on enterprise scale, multinationals, globals, when we're talking about 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 employees? Are we you know, par for the course? Are we getting closer, or are we starting to steer further away as we see the emergence of new tools, but also what's being broadcast and told, you need to do this? Well, actually, no, you need to do everything through Teams. No, actually, you need to, or we're anti-Microsoft, therefore we don't trust it, and then you try to find your alternative. Are we still on course, or are we getting closer? Or are we I don't know, still on this happy average?
Yeah, I think there's 2 things. There's very rarely in a user's regular personal life or regular work life is there just one tool or one way to do something. And I think that our customers are allowing us to educate them of that. And so when you hear things like, you only need this one thing because it is the one tool that cuts wood, hits nails, you know, strips wallpaper, like, no, that doesn't exist. You need different tools for that. And I think what David said a minute ago, like, so perfectly matches with what we've been saying in this market for a really long time, which is, if you can get to the point where you accept that all of this innovation is really really powerful plumbing. It's really powerful plumbing that allows you to create the right solution for your organization and for your employees and for your use cases. Then I think you can be wildly successful. And I think you are driving much closer to what an employee experience platform can be for your business. If you take all these tools at face value, that each one of them is in of themselves this magic bullet or arrow that solves all your problems, you'll never be successful because you'll constantly be running around in circles. And so we've been educating any prospective customer that will listen in every talk I've ever given, that they say, well, you know, as Microsoft gets better, aren't companies like you in trouble? And we say, no, the better the plumbing is, the better the value is I can add on top of it to deliver something that actually solves problems. Because there's 40 plus workloads in Office 365, plus Dynamics, plus everything you can do in Azure, plus cognitive services, like the list goes on and on. Like it's not like a checkbox at a buffet where it's like, I want this type of food tonight and, you know, different food tomorrow night. It's how do I solve the problem that's right for my business today? What's that problem going to be tomorrow? What's it going to be a year from now? How is my workforce going to evolve? And how can I leverage all of the power in that plumbing to deliver an experience that feels like it was built for everyone that uses it?
Yes, and to the point of David, another way to say it, if, let's say, if your question, Christian, was how were we successful, if we can take some customer example where we succeed with the positive feedback with the stakeholder saying the project is a success, it was because the customer, the organization per se, didn't expect to save all the problem for all the organization, but because they decide that the digital workplace, their platform, will progressively fix one business goal after another. So humbly, when, let's say, it's an HR that say, how can you help us in the onboarding process? Better connecting between new employees and their manager and the rest of the information. When it's a sales manager saying, how can you help me improving the repeatable activities about answering a request for proposal and so on. The problem is very specific, and this is where our platform, with the plumbing analogy that you make, David, we take an opportunity in Dynamics. It makes trigger a Teams creation with respect a given template. We add the pricing information. We add some workflow to approve a pricing discounting. The problem to be fixed was simple, well, let's say, framed by the customer. Then we can say we are close to a success in some case.
Yeah, I mean, echo what the guys have said. In my personal opinion is, I think in a short summary to your question, Christian, yeah, I think we are getting closer. I think one of the biggest myths in our industry is that the technology is not important. I have to sit through so many internal comms events where I get told that the technology is not important, and it is. I mean, if it wasn't, we'd all be watching Betamax and on MySpace, and electric cars wouldn't be a thing. Like, it would generally, the world would be a very different place. So technology is massively important. The answer, like David said, it doesn't answer everything. It's not going to solve all of our ills. It's going to help us. It's going to help us move forward. And look, if we look at each one of our products independently, we look internally and say, well, what were we like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and compare it to today, the products are all vastly improved. We have to constantly improve because, as we put, Microsoft is always improving. They're always making things better. We have to move with them. The industries are changing. Trends are changing. Behaviors are changing. You know, data privacy is now, we're more aware of it. It's more of a prevalent topic. And the idea of employee happiness is now a thing, right? Whereas 3 years ago, you'd speak to a CEO and he'd say, what? I don't care. Like, you know, get your work done, right? And the world is evolving so quickly. And I think this is all good. It's all good because it allows us as product vendors to make our products better and to meet the needs that are ever changing. And that's why most of us are OpEx, right? We never stop. There's no such thing as a finished intranet or a finished digital workplace. There's no such thing as a finished employee experience.
I love that. We try to preach the sort of a launch and learn. You're going to have to evolve with technology, because as much as you would like to, you cannot guess what the impact of the technology is going to have. And so as you move forward, you're going to see an impact on your culture. You're going to see people use it, and it might be good, it might be bad, and you're going to have to adjust it. And I really love to hear that perspective, because I think slowly but surely, there's an understanding, oh, we don't have to get it right on day one. We're going to have to keep doing fine adjustments. And I'm assuming that all of you are experiencing that more or less to this, that people are now trying to grow into their solutions rather
100%.
than just buy them.
Yeah, and we encourage it, right? I think, you know, we'll if we still get customers who are like, we'll pay you and an implementation partner, whatever it is that you want, go behind the curtain and come out when you're done and show us that you met all our needs, and we'll walk away from that business. That is business that is destined to fail.
Yeah.
We are just about out of time. We have about 2 minutes left. This has been a fascinating discussion. I'd actually love to repeat this at any time, and preferably in person. It's really exciting to hear your perspectives, and also really neat, and I'm pretty sure for our attendees, to hear how aligned you are all with your perspective and seeing the market. It's a really healthy perspective that these gentlemen have, and I can only recommend talking to any one of them. It will really help you get your bearings and get some orientation. If you have any questions, or if there was anything that you particularly liked or heard, please let us know and get in contact with us, and we'll be happy to go further into any of those topics. This webinar was recorded, so feel free to watch it again and share it with your colleagues. I want to thank all of you. It's been really fun, and being able to pick your brains and watching you bounce off of each other. It's great. I think we're moving into an exciting time, and I think that these healthy perspectives are going to help everyone succeed and get a little bit closer to that mark that they're looking for.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Christian.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.